As a high schooler, I would have associated Vienna sausages and Little Debbie cakes with Kentucky. I, an Illinois girl, thought it was what native Kentuckians ate. In retrospect, this idea seems very peculiar, since I now live in Kentucky and haven't had a single Debbie cake or Vienna sausage. But my high school self had reason to believe this was true. It all started on mission trips I would take with my church youth group to Appalachia, Kentucky. We went to the easternmost regions of the state to help rebuild old, rotted, and sometimes collapsed houses. Besides seeing these poor living conditions, I would argue that the food habits were the biggest culture shock. On one occasion I recall a little girl eating sausages, Vienna sausages, out of a can with a plastic fork for lunch. In the previous year, the mother of the family whose house we were trying to make livable asked if she could buy us a box of Little Debbie cakes as a thank you for our work, because it's all she could afford. Hence my previous Vienna sausages and Little Debbie cakes comment. These two seemingly random food items represented a larger trend I found in eastern Kentucky eating: processed foods. The organization we went through for our mission trip was the Appalachian Service Project, or ASP. The coordinators of the organization emphasized to the volunteer groups, like my youth group, that we should help support the local economy. This meant we had to adopt a strict no Walmart rule. Any supplies we needed were to be purchased at the local general store, and our meals reflected this. For breakfast every morning at 7:30, all of the different work crews would congregate in the school cafeteria to line up for the buffet-style breakfast. Buffet in the sense that two lines went down the sides of tables set with food, not in the sense that you could eat all you wanted. We had to wait for everyone to go through line before getting a second serving, and sometimes there was just barely enough for that first serving. As far as the food on this one-serving buffet, there was cereal and sometimes biscuits from a can with perfectly round sausage patties. If you were really lucky, there was French toast sticks. Right after breakfast, work crews would break up into different chore stations, one of which was the lunch-making station. Your materials: peanut butter, white bread, and jelly, from a can. And no matter what combination of PB&J, PB, or just J Sammy's you made, they all went back into the Wonder Bread bag you emptied to make lunch in the first place. Then you pop the bag in your work crew's cooler to eat on your work site later. Unfortunately, if you didn't have a good Wonder Bread bag tire, you could end up eating soggy sandwiches for lunch. After a hard day of work at your site, which for me consisted of cleaning out a house filled up to the knee with rotting trash, insulating, repairing a leaky roof, or pulling up water-rotted floors, we'd come back to the cafeteria for dinner. Depending on the day, we'd have spaghetti, square-shaped pizza, chicken nuggets, basically anything you'd expect from your elementary school lunch ladies. And honestly, this food was great for the first couple of days, but then you'd start craving Mom's home cooking, even fruits and vegetables. The canned peaches, canned green beans, and iceberg lettuce salad you'd been eating just wasn't cutting it in the produce department. Anytime we'd get a watermelon for dinner, which was a rare occasion, everyone would rush to it like a starved dog. Fresh foods were a luxury. Even though there was a Walmart in the next town over where we could easily drive to get these fresher foods, we were living under the strict no Walmart policy. All of the food we were eating was from the local general store, so essentially we were eating what the families we were serving ate. It seemed like everything came from a can. Even the jelly I mentioned before came from a can. Or it was frozen, like the sausage patties, French toast sticks, pizza, chicken nuggets, the list goes on and on. Besides that rare watermelon, everything the locals ate seemed to be packaged. I sympathized with the poor families because they were economically obligated to the cheap diet of processed foods that I was complaining about after only a couple of days. And I had always attributed this to their poverty, but then I read an article by Mark Bittman. He challenged my idea that junk food is more affordable. He claimed that junk food is not cheaper than wholesome food, and in fact, junk food is more expensive than healthier options. As he explained it, the tendency of low-income Americans is cultural rather than economic. When I thought about it, it did make sense. Americans are stereotyped as fast food, junk-eating, obese people, and there is truth behind it. Speaking as a college student, I go out for food on a weekly basis, and even back home in Illinois, we always had frozen pizza and chicken in our freezer, or bags of chips in the pantry. So maybe the eating habits of eastern Kentucky wasn't due solely to economic issues. Maybe it's a reflection of the American culture. Then I asked why. We know that these foods are bad for our health, and if what Bittman stated was true, it's also more expensive. How did eating processed foods become so ingrained in American culture that we purposefully ignore health and economic warnings? And why is it that lower income families seem to disregard this information more than other socioeconomic classes?